During week 1 in a screencast, I said I would provide for you another screencast talking about brain-based learning, a user's guide to the brain. This is something I've been really interested in for the last few years, and I guess I'll go ahead and mention that Carrie Mitchell and myself, we've been working on active learning and brain-based learning for a few years. We're doing a big project this semester to try to help our fellow colleagues in the faculty side think about how do we design our classes to best meet student needs when it comes to the science of learning. And this is kind of the student side. As a student, what can you do to make your time in class and outside of class the most productive? How can you learn the most? How can you get the most out of what you're doing here? What I'm going to be doing is presenting a screencast version of a workshop I did live that took about an hour. I'm going to try to keep this to about 10 or 15 minutes. So if there are things in here that are intriguing to you, feel free to reach out to me if you want more information on where you can find research or stuff to read or videos or books. Pretty clearly, I think this is related to every class, and certainly it's related to our class, philosophy and writing. And I'm going to talk about a few of the things in this screencast that we're also talking about in week 3. So there'll be direct connections to the stuff about multitasking, for instance. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in here. I won't actually pause this video for 3 minutes, but if you want to think about these 2 questions, pause the video, jot down some ideas, or just think about them for a few moments. So, what is a memory? A memory is, I'm going to hide my little talking head here. A memory is a set of encoded neural connections that reconstruct past experiences, and they do this in part by firing the neurons that were originally involved when the experience happened and when those initial memories were formed. So it is in fact almost a way to kind of relive an original moment. But I guess the important thing to remember here is a memory is a physical thing. It is literally neurons and chemical messages, and so those are physical things, and those things are happening in your brain. So how do we make memories? Information comes in, sense information, right? Sights, sounds, tastes, smells, things that you can touch. This would also include all the sorts of sensory information that we have developed machines to help us do, right? So we can look at spectrums from stars, all sorts of other kinds of things. But we have incoming information. Our senses grab onto that stuff as it's coming in, and you'll note here, if we're not attending to the information when it comes in, we lose it. If we do pay attention, then it can become part of our short-term memory. It's possible. It doesn't automatically, but it can. If we rehearse things while we're thinking about them, we can hold them in our working memory for a little while. And if we then rehearse those things elaborately, repetitively, and over a period of time, we can take short-term memories and encode them into long-term memories. Now, if we don't encode them properly, we can forget them. And if we do encode them properly, we can still have problems with them. But you can see making memories is a long, complicated process. Let's first take a look at this initial step. So, as we pointed out, the first step in forming memories is paying attention. If something's happening and you don't hear it or you don't see it, well, you're not going to form a memory about it because you never attended to it in the first place. So, some simple suggestions. Minimize distractions. Maybe not so simple. Maintain eye contact with the person talking. Now, in a face-to-face class or in a meeting, look at the person who's talking to you. Why do you think Carrie and I put videos in the class? One of the reasons is that research shows that it is easier to pay attention to a video if it has a talking head in it. I don't necessarily like seeing my little talking head in the corner of all my videos, but I know from my own experiences watching videos and from student reports and from research done all over the place that you can watch a video longer, you pay attention to it more, and you get more out of it if it has a little talking head in the corner. Why? Let me speculate. Human beings are designed to want to watch other people's faces, right? It's really important to the human being species that we know what other people are doing. We are social animals. And so if there's someone talking, if you watch their face and pay attention to them, it is much easier to pay attention. So Take notes, doodle with a pen and a paper. Why do I say take notes or doodle? This isn't about transcribing everything the person's writing. I'm talking about how do you actually pay attention. For many people, the act of note-taking itself, regardless of what you actually write down, is a way to help pay attention. And so even doodling activates your kinesthetic part of your brain, and that can help you pay attention. So even while you're watching online videos, it may help to take notes or just to doodle with a piece of paper. Fidget, stretch, move around, take a break. The great thing about online classes is you can take a break after 15 or 20 minutes. It's not always as easy in a meeting to stand up and stretch, but that might work there too. Vary your routine, don't do the same thing every time, and find connections with your own life. It is easier to pay attention to something if you care about it. And if you can make a connection to your own life, even if you have to stretch to make that connection, it can help you pay attention to something. So again, if you're not paying attention, you're not ever going to form memories, right? You're not forgetting things that you never attended to in the first place because they were never even in your memories to begin with. So let's assume we've paid attention. We want to get things in our short-term memory as the first step in getting things into our long-term memory. And why are we talking about memories? Well, memories are what actually get us to learning in the long run, right? Memories aren't learning, but learning requires making memories. So what is our working memory? Working memory, I love this quote from Amanda Morris. She says, working memory is the mental sticky note that we use to keep track of the information until we need to use it. Working memory actually focuses our attention because it's focused on the thing that we're paying attention to right now. Working memory operates over a few seconds, maybe 10 to 15 seconds. It actually manipulates information and it forms really temporary storage. So working memory is like this. You're watching TV at night, or now it's probably more likely you're watching an ad on your phone, and they give you a web address or a phone number, and so what do you start doing? You start saying 970-286, and you start reciting the number. You're juggling that number right on the sticky note until you can write it down or until you can dial it. That is your working memory. It's those bits of information that you're holding in your brain live at any given moment. We can only hold 4 or 5 things in our memories at one time. That's just the limitation of the human brain. Working memory is temporary. Without ongoing attention or rehearsal, those memories that you're juggling will only last for 10 to 15 seconds. So if I tell you a phone number and you don't rehearse it to yourself, if you wait about 10 or 15 seconds, it is very likely that that phone number is now gone, or the name that someone gave you, or anything, right? That's how long that working memory. It lasts about 10 to 15 seconds, and if you don't do something with it, it's gone. And we should say this, learning happens only when working memories are encoded into long-term memories. Juggling those memories is great. It's a necessary step, but that doesn't count as learning, because learning means you can come back to it later and you can use it in different circumstances. Let's talk about multitasking. If you've already read this stuff for week 3, then this is going to be old school, but I'll just ask you to think about this. Are you good at multitasking? How would you rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 10? And you might think about this. Would you learn more if you avoided multitasking? Well, again, I'm preaching to the choir here. You may not think you'll learn more, but at least at this point, you probably know what the research says. The research says that you will learn more if you avoid multitasking. Now, I'm not going to show this video. This is just an updated version of the video that you're going to see in week 3 in the divided attention activity. But I love this video because it really illustrates that when we think we're multitasking, what we're really doing is switch tasking. We're moving back and forth quickly between 2 or more tasks. And what does the research show? And what does this video show? Again, you can watch it in the activity for week 3. Multitasking is slower, significantly slower. It is also fraught with errors. You're way more likely to make mistakes when you're multitasking. So it's slower, it's more prone to error, but on the bright side, it feels good. Unfortunately, what I love about this guy, Dave Crenshaw, is I think the title of his little video is Multitasking is a Thief. It feels good, it feels efficient and productive, but it's actually counterproductive. Now, what does Dave Crenshaw and what does the research say we can do? You can do background tasking, right? You can do some task while there is something mindless or mundane going on in the background, right? You can chew gum and watch a video at the same time. In fact, chewing gum might actually make it easier, right? Because you're activating your kinesthetic part of your brain. But you cannot talk on the phone and watch a video at the same time. And you can't follow Twitter or Snapchat while you're trying to study. You can go back and forth quickly between those two things or between three things, and you can get good at switching, but you will be slower at it. So what do we know about multitasking? Here's a study reported in Forbes, done at University of London. Multitasking during a cognitive task can lower your IQ by up to 15 points, your perceived IQ. And that's really taking an adult, a normal adult, and turning that person into an 8-year-old. And so I guess the question is, do you want to be doing your cognitive tasks at the level of a competent 8-year-old? Or would you rather be a mature adult when you're studying or you're in a meeting? Now, I'm talking to you as a teacher to students, but I'll tell you that all of this stuff applies to everyone. And as much as I talk about multitasking to you, I'm talking to myself because I have a lot to do too. And I'm really tempted to multitask. I've got my email going off at all times, my phone's ringing, I've got my phone on my desk is ringing, my cell phone's here, I have people walking past my door. I am good at switch tasking, but since I've been doing this research, I have definitely found that it is not as efficient and fraught with errors. So I don't want to be a colleague or a teacher who has the IQ of an 8-year-old. I want to bring my best game to you, so I'm going to try to not multitask, for instance, while I'm doing these kinds of screencasts for you. I'm going to try not to be distracted. What else do we know? Those people who report being good at multitasking, enjoying multitasking, are actually the worst at it. The better you think you're at multitasking, it is really likely that you are horrible at it. Who are the best multitaskers? The people who think that they're better at single tasking. This may be one of those ideas that is a challenge to entertain. As someone who multitasks all the time, who has a boss at work that expects you to multitask, who wants you to look busy, who has many things going on at the same time, you may feel you have no option but to multitask. I guess what I would like to tell you as a student, I know your time is busy. You may as well be as productive and efficient within that study time as possible, and multitasking is not a good thing to do. Well, here we are, 13 minutes in, and I haven't gotten too far. I'm going to keep going today. Multitasking can definitely interfere with your ability to pay attention, because if you're on your phone, you're not going to be able to pay attention, so you're not going to remember this stuff anyway. But multitasking and other kinds of distractions can also impact the formation and encoding of long-term memories. And you got that out of that the article when we were reading about the students in the test who were doing the experiment where they played the video game and they had to try to figure out the weather patterns. And what did the study show? The students who were distracted, they could still play the game. They could still get the right answer about which weather pattern was happening, but they didn't really learn anything. They couldn't talk about why. They couldn't translate that knowledge to another context. They couldn't draw analogies from it. That's what learning is, right? It's not just knowing something, but it's forming those long-term memories that then you can reach back to a year later in a different context, and something that you learned in ethics class, then you can take into another domain. So again, I know you're here. You've got goals, and it's probably not just to get a passing grade in ethics. You want to take what you're going to learn here, and you want to take it throughout the rest of your life. You're in this class. You may as well actually learn something that you can take into next semester or next year. So you've paid attention. Now, how do you encode long-term memories? Some strategies. Learning involves encoding information into long-term memory, right? Long-term memories are formations of neural pathways, and the formations of long-term memories require time and repetition. You might form that memory, that initial neural connection, the first time you learn the new idea. But if you don't rehearse it, those neurons will literally disappear, right? They degrade. Your body will say, These proteins that I have used in my brain to build these neural connections, Eric isn't using this stuff. I may as well reallocate those proteins to some other memories, right? So that's how you forget things. You never put them in long-term memory in the first place, and so they don't stick around long enough. At the end of the semester, when you look back at all of the stuff that you don't remember, you didn't forget that stuff. You never learned it in the first place, right? You had it in your short-term memory. Maybe you crammed for it and you passed the exam. We can cram a lot of stuff into our short-term memory, right? And remember it for a day or two or a week. But if we don't actually attend to the time and repetition to build those long-term memories, all we're doing is learning enough to pass the class, and we're not bringing forward any of that stuff into the next semester. So what does that really mean? Elaborate rehearsal. Concentrate on the meaning. Think about explaining the thing that you're learning to someone else. Generate your own examples. Make connections to what you already know and what you already care about. That's what studying means, right? It's not just reading. It's not just looking at words. Elaborative rehearsal means taking the ideas that we're talking about in this class and on your own. I mean, Carrie and I give you lots of opportunities to do this in discussion and writing prompts and activities. But on your own, you want to be doing this while you're studying, right? You want to be figuring out ways that you can work on elaborate rehearsal so you can actually learn the material from this class. Retrieval. What is retrieval? It means literally going into your brain and retrieving that information that you knew, calling on that memory and recalling it. Exercise your memory by repeatedly retrieving the information. And it's important to think about spaced retrieval. I could study something 10 times or 20 times, but if I do it all in one day, that's cramming. Spaced retrieval means spreading out the times that you practice retrieving this information over the course of days. And what the research actually shows is the shorter the interval between the retrievals, the less effective learning will be. So if you're doing 10 retrievals, but you're doing them all within an hour, that's not as good. All within a day, that's better, but still not very good. What's the optimum level? Think about how far away the exam is, or the test you want to learn, that you want to show that you know the stuff on. 10 to 20% of the time between now and when that exam is, 10 to 20% of that time is how often you should be studying, right? So if you had an exam that was a month away, you should be actively trying to retrieve that information every 3 or 4 days until that exam. That's your best bet of actually learning the material. Well, you're supposed to be studying 2 to 3 hours a week for every credit hour of this class. Well, this is a 6-credit class, so you can do the math. That doesn't count the 3 hours plus 3 that we would be spending in class, right? So Carrie and I, again, have provided you with a lot of opportunities to practice, but we have not given you 20 hours of work a week. So studying is on you as a student, right? That's what you bring to the game. It's the studying, the preparation, and what do we know? About 70% of what you read in a book or hear in a lecture is lost within 24 hours, including what's in this screencast right now. Just watching it is not enough. What you can do during your study time before class, what can you do before class to help improve what happens during class? Well, one thing is to construct a framework. Construct a framework so that when you go to class and you hear a lecture, those ideas have something to scaffold themselves onto. Now, in an online class, there are no lectures. That's why Carrie and I really want you to, for instance, do the reading over the weekend, and then to take the quiz multiple times up until Tuesday. So you're reading, and then you're practicing retrieving that information, and then by the time you get into the work for the week, right, the discussions, the activities, and the writing prompts, you already have a scaffold that the things that we learned during the week can plug themselves into. Of course, you're not going to totally understand the content before you go to class. But even if you only know a little bit of it, you have something that the facts that you hear can attach themselves to. What about after class? What can you do to actually process that information that you learned in class so you can learn it? Well, one thing is you might think about something called the testing effect. Just the fact of testing yourself over and over, that is retrieving the information. This is why Carrie and I built Quizzing to Mastery into the course. It is one of the best ways to learn. You probably think that quizzes are a way for your teacher to determine how much you learned. And that is how some teachers use quizzes. But quizzes and testing is really a learning technique, because every time you quiz yourself, you force yourself to go back into your brain and to fire those neural connections again. So if you take a quiz 7, 8, 9 times, you're retrieving that information from your brain 7 or 8 or 9 times. Now, what would be the best way to take those quizzes? It wouldn't be to take them all on Tuesday. The best way to take the quizzes would be to go in on Friday when the quiz first opens, take the quiz then go do the reading, then take the quiz on Sunday, then take it later on Sunday, then take it on Monday, then take it on Tuesday. Right? The longer you spread out those quiz attempts, the better. I'm 20 minutes in. I'm going to click through the rest of these slides relatively quickly. It's not all about studying. Your brain is a part of your body, which is a physical entity. And so what else have I learned in my research about how the brain works and about the science of learning that could really pay off for you? I won't say this is rocket science. You've probably heard most of this stuff before, but I'll just tell you this is not just stuff that might have heard or read. There is actual research done that actually demonstrates that this is effective as a way to learn. You need 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. There are a few outliers that can get by on less sleep than that, but most of us are not those outliers. I know you're busy. You probably struggle to get this much sleep, but it is critically important. Not only because without sleep you're going to be tired the next day and you're going to have trouble paying attention. In fact, I've read some places that lacking sleep all night is practically like being drunk the next day in terms of your ability to pay attention. But the other thing that happens is while you're asleep, your brain is working. It's consolidating memories. It's freeing up space for new memories. It's moving memories from short-term to long-term. Now, sleep researchers aren't completely sure what's happening, but we're pretty sure that you're rehearsing during sleep. I read some really cool stuff about studies on rats that work mazes. They got to walk a maze to find their cheese. Well, they do these brain scans of them at night, and while they're sleeping, guess what they're doing? They're walking the maze in their sleep. And the rats that are actually getting enough sleep and having REM sleep and dreaming, they're doing better on those maze tests. They forget less. They learn more. They're better after they slept on it than they were just when they were practicing it. So sleep is critical. You also need to eat properly. Your brain comprises a small percentage of your body weight, but it uses 25 to 30% of your energy. Your brain runs on sugar. And I'm not telling you to eat candy, but your body turns carbohydrates into glucose, and your brain works on glucose. We're going to talk about willpower this semester. One of the reasons people struggle with willpower is when you're tired or hungry, your brain literally doesn't have the fuel to give you the willpower you need. So that's why, for instance, I struggle with snacking late at night, right? If I'm hungry and tired, I don't have that willpower to stop myself from, eating too many cookies. So it's weird that you want to eat enough so you have the willpower to refrain from doing things you don't want to do. Exercise and learning. Kind of crazy to talk about exercise in an online class, but maybe not. Maybe you could be doing some of your work in this class while you're walking around or standing on a treadmill or at a standing desk. But what do we know? Exercise is good for you for all kinds of reasons, but I want to talk about how it actually helps you learn. Exercise actually creates a chemical in your brain, in your amygdala, that helps memories form. It is something called, it's a neurotransmitter, and it is produced while you exercise. And so the cardio work you're doing when you're jogging or running or, whatever you're doing, it is actually producing a chemical in your brain that stays there that helps you produce memories, right? That literally helps your brain construct the neural connections that form memories. You need that neurotransmitter in your brain, and exercise is the best way to get it. It improves memories, it improves your attention span, it helps you pay attention. There are all kinds of reasons why exercise is really, really important. Most of the research I read says that means about 30 minutes or more of vigorous exercise 3 or 4 days per week. After all, you want to produce those new brain cells, right? So you can learn and get smarter. What do we know about social learning? It works. You may not like group activities, as a teacher, we often don't want to give our students group activities because they're a pain in the butt sometimes, but the research really shows that human beings learn in groups even though it's chaotic. So find a study partner. That's why we have open discussions. That's why we're going to ask you to do peer reviews. That's why we have you do writing prompts where you work together. We invite you to look for ways to talk about the stuff in this class with someone else who isn't in this class, right? I mean, talk about ethics, talk about writing, share your writing. But just in general, social learning really does work, and it probably makes sense. Human beings, after all, are social creatures. A few myths to bust. You are not a right-brained person, and you are not a left-brained person. Your brain, you have two brains. You have a left brain and a right brain that are connected by the corpus callosum. Everybody, or almost everybody, has two halves. There are people who only have half of their brain, and they can still live and do okay too. But you have both halves, and you can use both, and everybody uses both. The reason I talk about this is don't stereotype your person as an art person because you're right-brained, or a science logic person because you're a left-brained person. You've got both halves. You can use them both. They work together. So don't sell yourself short. Another myth to bust. There are no such things as individual learning styles that individual people have. Learning styles are a myth. You are a multisensory learner. If you came up through the public education system in the last 20 years, it is very likely that someone told you you're an auditory learner, or you're a kinesthetic learner, or you're a visual learner. And what they meant by that is your brain is especially attuned to auditory learning, that you would do better if you practice mainly auditory learning. It's just I guess the sad truth is there is no research to back up the idea of learning styles theory. What does the research actually show? We're all multisensory learners, and depending on what you're trying to learn, different sorts of sensory information are probably the most useful. If you're trying to learn how to draw a map, you probably want to look at a lot of maps. You probably don't want to just listen to someone talk about maps if you're going to try to, draw one. You may in fact like visual learning, and you may like auditory learning. All I'm telling you is think outside the limitations that someone might have placed on you by telling you that you are a auditory or a kinesthetic learner. We all use all of these modes, and you'll learn best if you mix and match and try different things. Stress, self-doubt, and stereotyping. Fixed mindset versus growth mindset. A couple of things here. Number one, our brains are evolving, right? Brains are plastic. Brains can keep learning. You can do ethics. You can learn to be a great writer. You can become a great mathematician. If you practice long enough, you can get great at chess or video games. A fixed mindset is something like this. I'm bad at math, and no matter what I do, I'm never going to get good at math. I hear people say that all the time. I'm just a bad writer, right? It's just who I am. It's not who you are. It's who you are if you set those limits on yourself. If you stereotype yourself and you say that it doesn't matter what I do, no amount of studying is going to make me better, it's just not true. Now, you may make that a self-fulfilling prophecy because you decide not to try, but a growth mindset says something like this. It may be hard, but I can do it. And Carrie and I just know from our own experiences, we have students that come in so afraid of writing, they're actually coming in at a developmental writing level, and at the end of the semester, 15 weeks, they've gone from being a struggling, scared writer to someone who is more than ready to move to English 122. So, having that growth mindset, knowing that no matter where you are here, if you're willing to put in the work, you can get to somewhere. You may not be a genius, but you can learn a lot. That is critical. Don't stereotype yourself, and acknowledge that other people who stereotype you have a big impact on you. So you've probably heard stereotypes like men aren't good with emotions, or women aren't good with math, or women are better writers than men. Those negative stereotypes really can have an impact on you. So I think it's worth acknowledging that they are stereotypes and that they simply don't apply to all people. So it's just not true. So, don't get bogged down on those stereotypes. Think you can do it, have a positive attitude, and again, I'm not just talking about fantasy here. There is research that documents that having a growth mindset, limiting your self-doubts, can really make a difference. You also don't want to be over here in this extremely high stressed out position all the time, right? You're not going to learn a lot there, but you're also not going to learn a lot if you're disinterested and apathetic. The optimal stress is right here in the middle, right? We want to set a high bar for ourselves. We want to work hard. We want to have this optimal amount of stress, not over to anxiety, but we want to be pressing ourselves and pushing ourselves. So self-doubt, stress, and stereotyping, you can do it. Practice metacognition. We're going to get a lot of practice with this semester, but this means thinking about thinking. Think about the learning process. Think about what studying means to you. Think about multitasking. When you're reading, ask yourself, do I really know what I'm reading? Do I understand what I'm doing? What am I trying to get out of this? So, yes, be in the moment and be mindful when you're studying, but also be ready to rise above and look down on yourself and think about the process of learning while you're doing it. Last but not least, the person who does the work does the learning. I'm going to put my face back on here, and we're 30 minutes in, so we'll see if anybody's still with me. I want to talk about some of the research I've done, and one of my mentors is this guy, Terry Doyle. I've seen him live a few times. We've actually even invited him to Front Range to speak. This is his book, came out a few years ago, putting the research on learning theory into practice, learner-centered teaching. Dr. Doyle here, he's challenging people like me who are teachers by saying something like this. If you're not keeping up with brain-based learning, if you're not actively trying to find out the science of learning and how learning actually happens, you're doing malpractice, right? You're a teacher. You're supposed to actually figure out what works, and I'm trying. A lot of us are really trying. We're trying to look at the research to figure out how can we structure classes, how can we set up student situations and teacher situations that actually will help students learn. What does it mean? For me, it means trying to be a facilitator of learning and not just to pretend that my job is to pour content into your brain, right? That's not what me and that's not what Carrie, that's not what we're here to do. But what is Dr. Doyle's message to you? He says his mantra, the thing I took away from his book, is the person who does the work does the learning. We started this semester off with looking at hard work, and what Karen and I wanted you to take away from that is you're going to have to work really hard this semester, but the hard work you do will pay off. I cannot learn the content for you. I understand the ethics, right? I've been teaching myself ethics for 25 years, right? I've been doing ethics for a long time. I've been lecturing on it. I've been reading about it. I've done a lot of work on ethics. Carrie's done a lot of work becoming a writer, right? She's been writing for 20-some years. You have to do the work in this class, right? The person who does the work does the learning. What Carrie and I can do is we can provide a context for the learning. We can give you writing prompts and activities. But, when I look at an activity and you took 11 minutes on it, I can really tell you didn't put a lot of work into that activity. And even if you ended up with decent answers, what does it tell me? You could have gotten so much more out of it if you would have been willing to put the time and effort into it. I'm not expecting you to work 50 hours a week. But Carrie and I realize you probably don't even have 20 hours a week for this class. The hours you do have, we hope that you really focus and that you want to get the most out of those hours as you can, right? You're busy. You're paying a lot of money for this class, and that also means paying for the homework that we're required to give you, right? In order to be an accredited institution, we have to give you 2 to 3 hours of homework for every hour in class. I'm just telling you that learning is on you, right? Your teachers have to do their part, but learning is on you. The person who does the work does the learning. You want to learn, put in the work, and that's the way to do it. I hope this was useful. If you do watch this, again, it's not required. I'm not going to offer extra credit. What I will say is, if you wanted to email me and let me know you watched this, if you wanted to let me know what were the big takeaways for you, was there anything in here that you hadn't heard before, I'd like to know. I want to figure out ways to present this information to other students, other online students, so I'm looking for feedback. Thanks a lot. I hope this was useful. Have a good rest of your week.